Today we're going to be talking about group work, and especially in college, you will be doing group projects in many of your different classes. But even as you leave college and you go into the business world, there are many jobs out there where teamwork is actually something that you're going to have to do on a regular basis. Not every job, but quite a few jobs. So today I want to talk about teamwork that actually works. So, first off, let's just talk about the reality checks. Okay. So, in most group, there's going to be problems, and most problems are actually caused by poor communication, not a lack of ability, right? Most people are capable of doing their job, but poor communication is actually what's typically at fault. So, this lecture is going to help you to avoid poor communication, but more importantly than that, the entire class is going to help you with not having poor communication, and even just being mindful of the fact that poor communication is oftentimes what the problem is in most groups. That's going to help you in its own right. So, what is some of the things that good teams actually do? Number one, they plan ahead. Understanding what your deadlines are and planning incremental checkpoints ahead of time, and everyone adhering to those checkpoints ahead of time is going to give you a much better project. You want to make sure that you are communicating clearly. Expectations within the group should be very clearly understood by every team member. You need to make sure that you respect each other and your differences. Not everybody wakes up at 6 a.m. and is ready to go like I am. A lot of people like to do their work in the evening after they get off work. Some people like to do their work on the weekend. Whatever the case may be, we need to make sure that we respect other people. Um, in addition to that, we have to also respect other people in the way that just because I get up at 6 a.m., I don't need to expect everyone else to get up at 6 a.m. I have to give a little as well. Okay, we'll get into more of that here in just a little bit. And finally, you want to work as one team. You all have a goal at the end of the day, that is to complete your project, whatever your project may be. And so, in order to complete that goal or to get to that finish line, everyone on the team has to work toward that goal. If instead someone is told that they only need to write the introduction paragraph, then their only goal is that introduction paragraph. And now they don't feel like, or they don't expect that their portion of the project is due until the deadline, right? But that's not accurate. In order for everyone to actually get to the goal, which is the completed project, all of those little components have to be done earlier in order to make sure that the final project gets done on time. So let's look a little bit more into what that actually means. So, my first rule is finish early. Okay. So, if a project is due on Friday, that does not mean that you do it on Friday. If you're doing your work on Friday, you have already disrespected every other person on your team because you are not giving them a fair amount of time in order to review your work or to make your work cohesive with the project as a whole. And that is a very important part of what has to happen in order to hit that final goal. So, on individual components, there should be a minimum of a 24 hours early deadline for your individual component. That way, there's still an entire day or an entire 24 hours for other team members and other group members to perhaps give you some feedback on how to improve it or to change some of the wording so that the entire report reads as one voice. Whatever still needs to be done, proofreading, correct any grammar or spelling errors. Those are all things that need to happen before you actually turn it in at that Friday due time. Leave time for review. And this is a really important part. Sometimes we think, well, I proofread my own work and so it's already done, but that's really not the case. When we read through or proofread our own work, though we can sometimes catch some of the mistakes, we won't catch all of them because we know what it's supposed to say. So our brain automatically says, yep, that's what it says. And we just skip right over those mistakes because we know what it's supposed to say. Leaving time for someone else to go in and review your work allows for them to catch errors that you can't see on your own, and to make sure that your interpretation of what your portion of the project is matches what everyone else thought your portion of the project should have been, so that it matches the rest of the report. For example, if you are giving some ideas on how a project should be completed and you're doing a timeline, right? And you're including all the different steps on the timeline, and then someone else is doing a cost analysis, but they don't think that the steps you had are the same steps that they had. Now you guys have mismatched information in the same report. And if you wait until the last minute, you won't catch that. But if you leave time for review, if you leave time for everyone to review each other's work, the person who wrote the cost analysis can look at your timeline and be like, oh, we need to add. Or you can look at the cost analysis and say, oh gosh, I didn't get this in the timeline, or I have this in the timeline and we have no cost analysis for it. So my point being, you want to make sure that you leave plenty of time for that review and for corrections and to create one voice. So, why does this matter? Number one, less stress, right? If you are that person who loves to work early, get everything done early, and submit it early, you are going to be stressed out nonstop if you have poor communication from your team members. At the same time, if you are expecting them to work on your timeline, be early all the time, you're going to be very disappointed because there's not going to be that same communication. So you need to set goals and you need to set expectations for when communication should happen, so it lowers stress for everyone, right? If you're that early bird and you're constantly emailing, when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done? And then that deadline hasn't even come up yet. The early deadline hasn't come up yet. Then you're stressing the other person out, and it's making it more difficult for them to get their writing done as well. Be respectful of each other. All right. So that means be respectful of a person's time. If they say they're available after 5 p.m. and not before, then don't try to contact them before 5 p.m. If they say that the best way to contact them is through text and not via email, then make sure that text is how you're communicating with them. When your group first gets started, email, text, whatever you can do to figure out a way to communicate, and then everyone agree on how you're going to communicate. Be mindful and respectful of different lifestyles, opinions, the way that they go about doing their work. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means it's different. And of course, why does it matter? Because in the end, it will produce a better final product. When you work early, you will have a better final product because you have more time to review, make corrections, make changes, and improvements. Rule two, no surprises. Update your team often. All right. If you're the person that gets things done early, then just update your team and say, hey, I got my part done. I'm ready for someone to review. If you're the person who tends to work at the very last minute and someone just messaged saying they got their part done, simply click reply and say, I'm still working on mine, but I'll have it done by the deadline, right? Make sure that you communicate with your team often. For you, it may feel redundant or unnecessary, but all you're doing is giving the other people in your group peace of mind, knowing that you haven't forgotten, that you still plan to get the work done. If you're stuck, you're stuck. Right. I had a family thing come up this week and I really just haven't even had time to look at it. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. Whatever the case may be honest. Tell them exactly what's going on. If you're behind, say you're behind. That way, if being behind is going to put um, create a problem for getting the work done on time for the entire group, there's time for other people to step in and help you if needed. If you're behind because you're stuck, right? Maybe you don't have any ideas, then just simply saying that you're stuck or that you're behind is going to give everybody in your group the opportunity to offer feedback, offer you ideas, or even just simply have a meeting, collaborate, and come up with everything you need together. All right. Silent teammate is a problem. I cannot stress that enough. A silent teammate is a problem. Silence creates stress. If you do not communicate, if you do not email, text, respond, let people know what's going on, all you're doing is stressing your entire team out. And as a result, the entire project will go downward. All right. It forces other people to guess what you're trying to do. You might be working really hard and doing a phenomenal job, but if everybody else has no idea that that's what's happening, now you have people trying to do your part of the work for you because they don't know for sure if you're even participating. All right. And we don't want that. So don't force other people to guess, just simply communicate and communicate often. When you fail to communicate, when you stay silent, you break trust. Everyone else on your team feels like they cannot trust that you are getting your work done. And it doesn't mean that you're not working, it means they don't know that you're working. So just simply communicate. Rule number three, different is not always wrong. Now, when I was younger, I'll be honest, this was a tough one for me, right? I always thought that I knew the best way to get something done. And if I'm being honest, even as an adult, sometimes I still think that my way is the best way. And I have to literally consciously let that go to understand that there is more than one way to solve a problem. And sometimes when you let someone solve a problem their way, you actually learned something in the process because they thought of something that you didn't. Their life experience led them down a path that you had no way to know even existed. So don't forget that doing it different is not necessarily wrong. People work differently. They work at different times of the day. They go about solving a problem in lots of different ways, and that is a good thing. Be flexible. Allow for their ideas to come through, no matter how absurd you feel their idea is, and ask questions to help them explain it to you from their perspective. And see if you can come to either a compromise or maybe even come around to their way of thinking. Sometimes it might even mean that their way of doing something is going to take longer. And that is a choice that they can make. You can offer ideas on ways that maybe it won't take as long to get the same result, but at the end of the day, it's their choice to make. So if they do go a longer path, it's fine as long as they still communicate and meet those deadlines. All right. So with all of the don't do's, let's look at what do good team members do. Number one, good team members compromise. It is what it is, right? We have to compromise, and that means so many things in so many different areas. Sometimes it means that we have to be up later than we normally would in order to meet on a Zoom call with our team. That's a compromise for me. I am an early bird. I like to get up early and I go to bed early, right? So for me to stay up late to work on a team project is difficult, but sometimes it's necessary. Adapt to whatever's going on, right? So as things change, it's always good to have a plan, but sometimes the plan has to be a little more flexible. So if your initial goal was to have everything done by Wednesday for an assignment that's due on Wednesday or on Friday, and somebody messages Wednesday morning and says, my mom went to the ER. I'm not going to be able to get this done by tonight, but I will definitely be able to work on it tonight and then get it done tomorrow. Be flexible, be understanding, adapt as needed. Last but not least, focus on the actual goal. All right. Though we split up the project into smaller portions or individual components, understand what the team goal is at the end. Understand that those smaller components feed into that larger goal. And it's important that we maintain that understanding, right? So maybe this one portion is not as strong as someone else's portion. That's not a problem. That's where that 24 hours comes in, right? Now we can help to adapt and modify the weaker portion so that it matches the same level as the stronger portion. Simply pushing the parts together and submitting it, that is not a, well, it's not an A project, right? When you just take everybody's individual components and say, well, I hope they did it right, you're not actually doing a group project. You're doing a whole bunch of individual components that you're being graded as one assignment for. And that's not going to be an A project. All right. The whole point of a group project is that you are able to help each other so that the entire project is an A quality project. All right, moving on. Number four, one voice. What does that even mean? One voice, right? The final project should sound like one person wrote it. That's what one voice means. It just means that it should sound unified. It should not read like four different people wrote four different sections. It means you need to make sure that you all edit all of it so that your individual voices are part of the final project, but that it reads like one person wrote it. All right. How do we actually do that? We review each other's work. We match the tone and the style. Okay, so formatting matters also. And then assign a final editor. So one person at the very end goes through all of it and just make sure it all reads cohesively. In group projects, it's really important to build that trust fast. Especially in college, there's not a lot of time. If you have an entire semester long project, you're only talking about 16 weeks. If it's a summer course, you're talking about 6 weeks. And that's if it's the entire time. More often than not, it's only going to be a few weeks that you're working together. So you have to build trust fast. So when you say you're going to do something, do it. Be reliable and communicate often and early. All right, bad team habits. What are the big three, right? The big three is last minute work. When you are literally down to the wire doing the work at the very last minute and no one has time to review your work, that is terrible team habits. When you do not communicate with your team and they're constantly having to guess if you're even participating, that is not good habits. Even if your last minute work is A quality work, if you are not giving everyone else a chance to be a part of that, it's not a group project. Okay. And it ends up being very disproportionate because your portion might be really good and someone else's may not match quite that well. All right. Rigid thinking, believing that your way is the only way is a great way for your team to fail. Okay. Open your mind to different ideas and allow compromise. All right. Good team habits, planning ahead, sharing updates, and respecting differences. I've said this a lot already, but I cannot run this home more. Planning ahead makes a huge difference. Understanding that planning for the individual components, which do not have scheduled deadlines for the course, is something you have to do on your own. You have to create your own deadlines within your group for those individual components. And then the final deadline, the one that the course says, that's when everyone should have already had time to work on each other's sections, edit, review, you name it, before you actually submit. Sharing your updates, giving feedback, even just saying, I'm working on it. Here's what I have so far. I'm going to continue to work on it tonight. That is a really great way to update and make everyone feel confident that what you are saying you're going to do, you're actually doing. And of course, respecting each other's differences. That can be anything from a mindset to an idea, you name it. All right, conflict is totally normal. All right, disagreements are totally fine in a group. I know that sounds wrong, but it's actually very helpful. When you disagree on a concept, you have to think deeper about it. You have to defend your idea and you have to compromise and understand someone else's perspective. Disagreements are great. Poor communication, however, not so much. If you are not portraying your ideas in a clear and concise way, it's going to make it very difficult for anyone to understand your perspective, let alone come around to your idea. So, handling conflict is going to be very important. When you do feel like you disagree with someone, stay calm. They're not trying to attack you directly, right? So listen and hear what they have to say. Listen to their entire perspective before you make any kind of judgment. Then you want to focus on a solution. So once you've heard what they have to say, you both maybe have gone back and forth with why you think that's a great idea or why you don't think it's a great idea, and offer some solutions back and forth. What's probably going to happen is you're going to find some kind of a compromise in between that's going to work for everyone. So stay calm, listen first, then focus on the solution. All right, simple strategy. Listen to what's going on, listen to what's being said, listen to the expectations, Then share your ideas, your expectations, your hopes, your organization of how you think the project should be done, and then solve, right? That means maybe you are solving a problem, maybe you are as a group determining exactly when deadlines are going to be and how you're going to communicate, but it's a constant circle, guys. Listen, share, solve. Listen, share, solve. There is going to be a constant rotation of this as you go through the project, because the project isn't just start today and finish tomorrow. The project is something that we do over time. And so there's going to be conflicts that come and go. There's going to be decisions that need to be made. And in order to make those decisions, we have to listen first, then share our ideas, and then come up with a solution. So, the bottom line is, in order to work effectively as a team, you have to finish your portion of the work early. You need to communicate often. You have got to be flexible. And sometimes that means you do more than what you think you need to do. And other times it means you need to do less than what you normally do. And finally, work as one team, focused on the end goal, understanding that the entire team has to get there at the same time. And so your portion needs to be done early enough that the team can get there at the same time at the end. All right. So that is my tips and tricks on how to work as a team in a way that actually works. This will work for you in college. The concepts here will also work in the workforce. Thanks, guys.